Thank you for joining us on our journey here to preserve the history of mixed martial arts. When I wanted to take on this project, I needed help. I brought in one of my favorite matchmakers, Miguel Iturrate, and the MMA detective, Mike Davis. So to do this, we've been able to preserve history. Welcome and enjoy. All right, welcome back to the Lights Out Podcast. Here with me is Mike Davis. I have a special guest today. We're doing our deep dive. We're going to find out somebody who has done a lot for the sport of mixed martial arts. As you're soon going to find out here real soon. Rob Kahn. Rob, how you doing?
Hey, Chris. Good, big fan.
Hey, I like this guy already, man. He's already better than all our other guests. One of my favorites. So we're going to start right at the beginning here. I know you did Golden Gloves boxing, 1995. Go start from there. What's going on?
Yeah, you know, when I turned 16, there was no wrestling in my high school.
What?
Yeah, believe it, no wrestling team.
Huh.
I grew up in a little high school up in, outstate. They say it's upstate, but it's really like 30 minutes from the Manhattan. There was no wrestling, so my father was, the father-son sport I grew up with was boxing. Like my father would take me to, well, back then there wasn't pay-per-view. It was you'd have to go watch closed-circuit television in those days. Yeah, you go to like a raceway and watch it on like with the hobos and the winos. And my father's bringing his 8-year-old son, so I could watch Sugar Ray Leonard and Tommy Hearns and all that stuff.
Hagler
and Hearns and Hagler Mugabe and all those great fights. Yeah. So I fell in love. I've been a boxing fanatic since I was a kid. So pretty much the day I turned 16 and I was able to drive, I found the easiest way to find a boxing gym is just drive into the poorest neighborhood you could find.
Back then it was.
It was, man.
Pretty much, just ask somebody and they'll point it out to you and you'll find one. So there was a place called The Cage in White Plains and Morris Park Boxing in the Bronx. And, I walked in, I'm like the only white kid in the place. And,
I can relate.
Yeah,
I can relate to that.
Like, right out of that scene, like everybody's just like, stop.
It stops, the music turned off.
Did you just...
Were they saying fresh meat?
Meanwhile, some of the nicest, coolest dudes ever, like, really took me under their wing and helped me out a lot, and so the time I spent in lower state New York was mostly either at the Cage or Morris Park, and I was pretty serious about it. But then I went to college, and up in SUNY Binghamton University now, and when you hit college, girls and parties and stuff, so kind of interfere with my training a little bit, and but I knew, like, going into my senior year that this was it. Like, if I didn't get a chance to really compete, I had taken some competitions sporadically, but I never, like, entered something like the gloves. So I went into the novice division. I entered it. I made it to the semifinals, which shocked me.
Well, the gloves, whether it was novice or advanced, was for very serious people.
Yes, but the way the novice, again, I don't want to overstate what I did. The novice division, I believe, you had to have under 10 amateur fights.
Yes.
To compete in it. So I was certainly under that, and
wait. I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm going to tell you because I grew up in that system as well. You don't wind up in the novice division just walking off the street.
No. It's not like
so. Let's really kind of frame it, because everybody in there had a legit training camp, had a goal set, kind of like the Pans or something like that. It's a serious competition, whether it's novice or advanced.
And let me piggyback on this, not to start bashing the millennials right now, but I'm going to. Back then, I believe, like, boxing, there was more people in it. It was like a type of thing. It seems like people don't want to do these tough sports in a way. So boxing,
it was crowded.
Is a shell of what it used to be, in my opinion. When I go to the Golden Gloves, I'm like, it's not what it used to be. Just throwing that out there.
Just by the way the Europeans are taking over the sport, you could tell, because Americans used to own the sport.
Oh, yeah.
And the way the Cubans are no longer placing in medals anymore, which is bonkers. Like,
crazy.
it's the sport has changed. Like, boxing in the Olympics and the amateur level, it's not the same.
Exactly.
So in you do boxing and stuff. So you went. You said you to go into a bad neighborhood. I can relate to that because I was one of those guys on the south side of Chicago doing the same thing. The thing is, the people that own those gyms, the coaches, they were there because they felt the need to give back to the neighborhood.
I believe my membership was $10 a month.
Yeah.
That's
like, you couldn't fake the love that boxing trainer.
Yeah.
He'd make you fight. He'd get your butt kicked. He'd put you in there to kind of test your will. But he did it because he loved you.
Yeah. No, there was no money in owning a boxing gym.
No.
It was all given back, and I loved the sport. I loved everything about it. I went up. I found that gym up in. It's funny. It's right where John Jones grew up. Endicott Boxing Club, and what's cool is the New York State Golden Gloves are held. There's two major gloves tournaments in New York. I mean, I'm sure there's like smaller
Sure.
ones, but you have the Daily News, which is down by New York City, which is really the biggest one in New York. But then you have the New York States, which is the one I did, which is in Canastota. And the really cool thing about that is
Bare Knuckle Boxing Hall of Fame is there. Oh, no, it's the Boxing Hall of Fame.
is
Yes,
there, yeah.
yes.
So I got to spend the day at not only the Boxing Hall of Fame and see all the cool, like to see George Foreman, the size of George Foreman's
Hands.
fist
Yeah.
cast. It looked like a sun, and all the other fists around it looked like little planets. Like,
Yes.
I mean, I
Yes.
couldn't believe the size of this thing. And so I got to spend, which I never even knew was there until this thing. And I think the year I got in, or the year I fought, Alexis Arguello was being inducted, and like some of my old-time heroes.
It's not bad.
So
I've
it's
heard
pretty
of 'em.
cool.
Yeah.
For induction, because they did it over induction weekend.
That's right. That's right.
So the semis were Saturday, the finals were Sunday, and it was right after it was right before that. I met a guy named Jon Burke, who got his black belt with me, and he had like a few months of jiu-jitsu. It's a long story on how he found jiu-jitsu, but he had found jiu-jitsu like pre-UFC.
Wow.
But he was, flying from New York to California. He would take privates with like Royce or Rickson for a few days, come back, and then it would just be him and his buddy, and they'd just be trying to figure things out that they learned.
Wow.
So he had a good bit of training, but it wasn't real. Like nowadays, you show up at a gym and there's 5 black belts on the mat. In 6 months you get really good. You get pretty good. Back then it was like
We've been
years.
30 in the whole country.
Yeah. And so
that.
he was probably, if I had to rate him when I met him, he was probably like a very beginning blue belt. And we became friends. He asked me to spar because he had never sparred with a boxer. And I remember him saying, he goes, "Listen, I need my hands. So I'm not going to wear gloves. So I'm not going to hit you. I'll just smack you." And, in my mind, fighting was still about, like, just punching and kicking and, or whatever. And I'm like, so let me get this straight. I could punch you with the 8-ounce gloves, but you're going to smack me?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, because I need to grab you.
I'm in.
I'm like,
Yeah. Oh.
I'm like thinking to myself,
This guy's not all there.
Yeah.
eh,
Okay.
okay, like, yeah, sure. Well, like 75 arm bars later and like, 20 chokes later, I'm like, what are you doing to me? And I remember seeing the ad for the UFC, but I saw the cage, and I thought it was just another wrestling organization. I thought it was like a steel cage match. I couldn't believe that there was a real fight going on, Like, I just thought it was like
You just got to throw someone over the top of that.
Yeah, I thought it was like, hit each other
Whoever
with
gets down
elbows.
first wins.
And I also even remember seeing Royce Gracie's ads for the In Action in like Black Belt magazine. But I was just like, this is too good to be. I'm not wasting my money on this stuff. So I never really gave it a thought until I got choked out and armbarred like 100 times by Jon. And I was like, you got to show me this stuff.
So Jon wanted live sparring to where he could do his submissions over somebody that's aggressively trying to punch him.
Yes.
That's a smart move.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very forward thinking for that time.
Yeah, he just smashed me.
Yeah.
And like I said, the idea of somebody taking me down and it didn't even make sense to me. But I did afterwards, like, and so me and him became good friends. And he was like, "Hey, look, I'm going to California for the summer." It was my senior year anyway, and so I packed my bags. I went out to California for like 8 weeks, and we trained like 12 hours a day at the Gracie Academy, and that was the start of my jiu-jitsu career.
All right, so Rob, you have the, proud distinction to say you're Royce Gracie's first American black belt.
Well, 5 of us got it the same day, but we were all the first. Yeah, the first.
Who
5.
got their belt first that day?
I don't even remember.
It's you. It's you.
All right, for this conversation.
He handed me the belt first.
It was clearly
You
me.
should just snagged, Number 1,
Actually,
baby.
I think it was Pat Hardy, but it was me, Pat, Buddy Clinton, Jon Burke, and Greg Thompson.
So, your story is very unique to me because you're a New York guy. You can hear it in your voice, your accent. And for you to get your black belt from Royce at that time, it's just not the time and effort and love that a person would have to do if the gym was right down the street. You had to jump on an airplane or physically move there.
Yeah.
How do you come to make that decision?
I did at first when I went out to California, it was really just, I felt helpless when I got taken down. Like I said, I had no wrestling background, and I was like, I don't want to feel helpless like that ever again. So let me go out and spend this intensive, and plus it'd be a cool adventure to go out to California. I'd never been there before. I'm going with a buddy of mine. I'm sure we're gonna have some fun. Let me do it for the whole summer. And that was really at the beginning the only thing I thought I was gonna do with jiu-jitsu. And by the end of the summer, I loved jiu-jitsu so much.
Becomes obsessed.
I never really that was all I wanted to do. But I had already taken a job in Manhattan, so I went back for a year to New York, and I set up the first Gracie Training Association in Westchester County, in New York. Henzo wasn't there yet.
Oh, really?
No, this is pre-Henzo, so I was,
I didn't know there was such a thing.
Yeah, Henzo didn't get there till like another year later.
Really?
You were really ahead of the curve.
So.
Yeah, New York.
Even both. I mean, across the entire country, you were one of the guys that were. You had your foot in front of everyone. Like you knew what it was before everybody else really had.
Well, there was that group in California that Southern California guys, the Dirty Dozen, like those guys who have been around since the '80s, who were there. I mean, those guys clearly had the jump on everybody. But for the East Coast or the middle of the country, I definitely got on board pretty early and relatively young.
I agree.
What was your job that you came back to?
Believe it or not, accounting.
You see, Chris, remember like when we go at jiu-jitsu tournaments, I'll introduce you to guys like, jiu-jitsu has ruined this person's life. Like his parents are super pissed at him.
That's another thing I want to ask. How would that conversation go? When you go, I'm done with college. I want to go to California for the summer and grapple with just like.
This is one of those guys. Like jiu-jitsu, well, you could say it ruined his life, but you're obviously very successful here. But the initial conversation with your parents, I mean, they had to talk to somebody going, all right, what are we going to do to talk him out of this?
What's wrong with this guy?
My father loves combat sports, so
dude.
he actually was pretty cool about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Like you said, it took him to the boxing matches with hobos there. Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
Did they think it was going to be a fad for you? Did they realize it was?
I think everybody back then, people didn't think there was money in this. There wasn't.
Yeah, I don't know what he thought, but like he loved combat sports, and he loves watching UFC, and he's a big fan of MMA. So like, I never really got any pushback from him. With it,
cool. It's actually it's very rare.
Very rare.
I was gonna say, let me tell you, every time I remember getting ready to fly to Japan, and like my mom would drop me off or something at the airport, I'd need a ride, and every time she'd be like, just tap out, just quit. What are you doing? You have a job, you can't be doing this stuff. I was like, I can't just tap out unless you don't have me in a hold. I mean,
me?
I'll get fired. I'll get blackballed. I can't. Okay, Mom. So no, there was never much love and support on my end.
Generally, there's not.
Yeah, yes. I mean, most people, it's not what you want for your kid typically, but no.
No, yeah, I definitely, my father was definitely not the norm.
That's fantastic.
I like it.
Yeah, that's really good.
He liked it.
So all right. So the style of jiu-jitsu that Royce teaches is like a combat style, like something
for fighting.
It's geared for fighting, and there's no arguing.
Arroyo Gracie Jiu-Jitsu all the way. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. So now you take two fights, one in 2005 and the other in 2006.
Yep.
Okay. You showed a lot of promise in those fights because I remember I was around at that time, and I remember obviously I heard your name before. Very accomplished Royce black belt, and when you got those two wins, both I think in the first round under 2 minutes total for both fights combined. You took those two fights. What was your motivation to take them, and why did you not pursue a professional career afterward?
Good question.
Yeah, good question. So I, when I started the Gracie Academy, my goal was to eventually. I didn't have any lofty goals of winning a title or anything, but I wanted to fight on TV.
Okay.
Like I'd love to have been in the UFC and like on television at some point. That would have been cool. But then McCain, remember, took it off pay-per-view. And that, you remember, you guys know very well about that whole dark period. Well, that was.
It was almost a shakedown.
It was like the whole Budweiser.
He's a boxing guy, Here, this is.
He was at a boxing match where somebody died. And
Budweiser.
This is too violent.
He was a huge fan of boxing.
And Budweiser. He also ran Budweiser distributorships who invested in boxing. And so, like, in my late 20s and early 30s, like, I remember like Frank Shamrock, who's so underrated when you look at like who was like some of the legends of the sport.
Agree.
Like Frank Shamrock was
Hall of
fantastic.
Famer.
Like when he beat
Jeremy Horn.
Tito,
Jeremy Horn.
Oh yeah.
He made. I remember they announced he made like $3,000 for that title fight, and it was like
He earned every penny.
And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like I love the sport and all, but I'm also a little money motivated. Like, I'm not fighting for $3,000. Like,
and he had to pay his own travel.
I'll fight in the beginning, but not like that's
the highest level.
Not
That's not
the final goal.
Exactly.
So like I started like thinking more about becoming an instructor. So when I moved to Florida in '04, I opened up the school. All of a sudden, the Fertittas and Dana, take over the UFC. It gets back on pay-per-view. The Ultimate Fighter happens. There's this huge resurgence of popularity. And I said to myself, if I'm gonna, open up a, I had the Royce Gracie already gave me my black belt. So, but I had no practical MMA fighting experience. I fought in boxing. I competed in jiu-jitsu and submission grappling. But I felt like if I'm gonna advertise MMA, I better get in a cage and do it.
Very smart.
You can't argue that logic. Like, you can't.
So yeah, I did a few fights, and I probably would have done a few more. I herniated a couple discs in my back during training, and like at that point, in that little time frame, I had my first child. The school started doing better. We opened up the second one in South Tampa. Like business, it just more and more obstacles got put into place, and if you don't really focus on, that training camp and getting ready and you have all these other things you're worrying about, and like I said, I had to take almost 10 months off just for the herniated disc. Like it just was like, what's the point of this? Where am I going to go with this?
Juice in the squeeze.
At 35, I think I was 35 years old at that point. Like, where am I realistically going to go with this at this point?
Okay, from my perspective at that point, like I understood your age, I just figured you were going to get fast-tracked. Like you were about to, you won your first 2 fights. I had a feeling that you were going to get a call up to the big show within another 1 or 2 fights, and that water was going to be deep immediately.
And that's the other thing. That's not necessarily a good thing either.
No,
right?
it's really not.
Yeah.
You don't want to be on the receiving end of a highlight reel.
No, it's like having 4 fights going. Like I remember Rodrigo Gracie, who is so underrated as a jiu-jitsu guy. Rodrigo is fantastic. He fought BJ Penn and was like 3rd or 4th fight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Rodrigo, I mean, we're talking about BJ Penn here. Like
beginning BJ Penn.
Yeah, as prime BJ Penn. As good as Rodrigo is, you just don't jump into a fight with BJ Penn, who's the lightweight champ of the world, with 4 fights.
And unfortunate for you guys, I would have to say, Dana really likes and loves and respects like Matt Sarah and all that group down there, but I think you might almost give him too much. Like, oh, this guy's with you, we'll throw him in here. Throw him in really tough right away. I don't know if that's a good thing. You know what I mean? I mean, it's kind of like it shows that he respects you guys a lot. But man, you gotta crawl before you walk and run. You know what I mean?
But I agree with you. But the thing is, it's like that's almost the reason why UFC got so popular, because boxing is like the promoters protect their fighters. The UFC always protected the promotion. It was like, oh, you're Chuck Liddell, you're our highest grossing fighter. Great, you're fighting the next best guy in the division next fight. And the next fight. And the next fight.
I agree with that, but my point is just.
But
usually they would have made you have 3 more fights outside the UFC to develop. Now they're throwing you in. Like, you're ready. It's like, oh, shit, I don't know if I'm ready. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's where you're going. It was a good and a bad thing. They got your exposure right away, but you got to be ready when you get there. You know what I mean? It's just tough when they're throwing you the wolves right away.
And it's hard. I mean, people don't realize, like, people always see the physical end of it, but they don't realize the mental end of it. The stress under the lights, like,
that's by far the hardest part.
By far, and you get a guy who might be the most talented guy in the division, but if you throw him in too early, he's going to be overwhelmed by the pressure, the lights.
How many guys have you? I don't know. How many guys have you had who come to the gym and you're like, my God, this guy's going to be good, and then they start to have a fight and like, what happened? I mean, they're gym fighters. I've had many guys who were way better in the gym and they fold under the pressure.
I would say it's like 98% to 2%. Like.
But that's true, man.
Talent,
it's great.
You get talent all the time.
Yeah.
You get guys who perform under pressure, that's rare.
I know. Some guys even do better in the fight than in the gym. That's amazing.
I could
a lot
give
of
you one
guys
example
way
of that.
worse.
Clay Guida.
Yeah,
you watch Clay Guida in the gym, you're like, oh, okay.
I mean, yeah.
And then you see him in a cage, you're like, that's not the same person.
Yeah, that is brilliant.
I'll tell you, and this is not an insult to Clay at all.
No, that's a compliment.
But I was in Matt Arroyo was fighting on the BJ GSP #2. And I was watching Clay Guida warm up. First of all, his warm up is probably a harder workout than almost anybody else's full-on training I've ever seen in my life. Like, the guy went for like an hour straight, like doing wrestling, straight to boxing, straight to mitts, straight to at a pace that was just like insane.
Yeah.
But I'm watching him and I'm like, his technique is really like, it didn't look all that sharp. You know? like, and again, I'm not trying to. I think Clay's an amazing fighter, but it was just like
he's fighting.
He's about to go in there. He was fighting Nate Diaz. I'm like,
struggle.
he's fighting Nate Diaz, and I'm watching him move on the ground and stuff. I'm like, I don't know. But then all of a sudden, I'm also, it's like an hour later, he's still going as the warm up.
Yeah.
And then they're like, Clay, it's your turn. You know, come on out.
5 more
He
minutes.
jumps up, he gives everybody the fist in the locker room, runs out the freaking door, jumps in, comes back, and he won the decision. I was like,
huh?
That was probably the hardest workout I've ever seen, and it was his warm up for the fight that he was going to do. It was like, it just shows you the mental part of this game. I mean, you're not going to break. You won't ever break a guy like Clay Guida.
No, you really won't. So, like, you're an East Coast guy living in California, and Chris and I are obviously from the Midwest. And the one question we have for everyone from California is, Goker and Rickson. Why did those two just never kind of come to a head? We got the rare opportunity to have an East Coast guy tell us what he believes was happening on the West Coast.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a weird situation. Like, why that? I really feel like Rickson felt like he paid his dues in Brazil. He fought.
For sure. You can't argue that.
And he saw. This is only my opinion. Like, Royce came up, and was put in UFC, and rose to this amazing fame. Very quickly, like meteoric rise to fame.
For sure.
And, it's his little brother, and I think Rickson was like, all right, I need to get paid if I'm going to do this. Like, and remember, Royce, there was that one time back in, I think it was UFC 1 or 2, it was like there was a press conference, and somebody had asked Royce, they said, how does it feel being the best fighter in the world? And Royce said, "Oh, I'm not the best fighter."
Yes, he did say that.
I like 4th best in my family.
My brother Rickson is. I remember it was like 10 times better than me, and it
shocked
just
everybody.
started this like craze. And I think Rickson started getting offers from Japan like that week, and I don't know if there was any money in fighting Gokor. Like, the Armenian crowd. I don't know if they had the fan base to match the money Rickson was going to get if he fought in Japan.
Yeah.
And it might be as simple as that. I'm sure, listen, they're both fighters. I'm sure neither one was worried about the other in terms of matching up with them. But, like, you're doing this for money. And I think at that point, Rickson was really looking for the money.
But I also get that. Like, I understand it. Like, we're pure. You're purist. All of us are purists here. But when you see something like that, it's just like, come on, do it for us.
The one I'm more disappointed with was Rickson Sakuraba.
Oh, yes.
That fight should have happened. And why it didn't.
And the money probably would have been there for that.
For pride, how would it not have been? I mean, especially especially after Sakuraba had just beat all the other races.
Royce, Henzo, and Hyan.
It wrote itself. Like, that literally wrote itself.
I mean, it was the perfect narrative for a huge fight.
Pay-per-view
especially
system,
at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been the biggest fight of all time at the time. But
okay, going back a little bit there, we talking about the tournaments, everything going on. Back in the 90s, California, it seemed like a couple different styles there. You had more of the BJJ versus more of a catch wrestling style. Some of them seemed like they got kind of heated. Do you remember any of that type of thing when people weren't getting along? Or?
I remember, actually, it wasn't just BJJ versus catch wrestling that didn't get along. It was BJJ versus BJJ that didn't get along. Like every school had this burning hatred.
Yes.
And it came,
It was almost like a gang thing,
wars.
right?
It was very much like a gang thing. Like, you even had friends in another school. You were a traitor, and it was just It was just very odd. Like, coming from boxing gyms never. I know wrestling gyms don't. You go train anywhere you want.
Yeah.
Boxing gyms were the same way. They knew I was, going to a couple different gyms, and it was just so foreign to me. But you're a Creonche, you're a traitor. You know.
Or how about like, and they would like fake a Brazilian accent, like English wasn't their first language to tell you that.
Oh yeah.
It was awesome. It'd be like you're from Ohio. Why are you talking to me this way?
That was another thing that drove me crazy. The Americans who would copy the Brazilians, like number one, they'd start walking around talking in a Brazilian accent.
My friend,
eating acai and wearing like Brazilian clothing. It's like, you just.
Would they get the big Brazilian flag tattooed on?
Yeah.
You're like German, bro.
Hey, I want to punch you in the face.
Oh my God! Like, don't you have any
It was weird.
for yourself?
And California was like the center point of that strangeness of the beginning.
It was very odd. It was very odd when you hear like blonde-headed, totally American-bred dudes talking in a Brazilian accent.
Yeah. Was that one of the things that led you to be like, I got to get out of here?
That was actually minor. It was all the other people that made me get out of California. It was like everybody was there to be an actor, like, especially where I was, like, or a writer or director. And if you couldn't do anything for their career, they had. Like, the idea of friendship out there was just different.
So how you could help them?
Yeah. If you couldn't help them, like...
I can imagine every waiter you probably ever had was an aspiring...
Every one of them.
Probably tried to audition.
Every one of them.
Yeah.
Every one of them had, they had their resume and their photo shoots with them just in case. And I don't know, it just...
if I lived there, I'd be acting like I'm a producer all the time. I would just, no, buy, sell, let me see your headshot.
I'm still friends with guys I went to elementary school with in New York, and like out there, it just didn't seem like friendship meant the same thing that it means.
It's more of a currency than it was an actual relationship.
And
that's interesting.
I had hurt my knee in a tournament pretty bad, MCL, ACL tear, and I was like, well, if I can't do jiu-jitsu now for the next 10 months, there's absolutely no way I'm living out here.
Yeah.
I'm leaving.
I feel you, man. I would get that. Well, okay. That being said, this was all a lot about, how BJJ and everything was going on during the 90s. I feel like it's changed. It's almost a totally different sport. I mean, it's moved leg locks a lot. Now, can you describe, what do you see as a lot of the changes that have been developing in BJJ in the past 20 years?
It's funny. I remember in '96 when I was still at the academy, a guy named Richard Bressler, who actually just put out a book. I forgot. I can't think of the name, but I call him... I call him Patient Zero because he was Royce Gracie's first student in America.
Really?
He started in 1978. He was a brown belt when I was at the academy when I first got there. Super nice guy. Just had a great book. Very honest account of the early years of jiu-jitsu in America and his his story of it. It's fantastic. I wish I could think of the name for him. But me and Richard were working in the academy one day, and back then there was no internet, there was no YouTube, there was none of that stuff. The first World Championships, the '96 World Championships went off, and we had finally gotten like the results, but we didn't get like the VHS tape sent to us yet. We're waiting. And I'm like, oh, this is gonna be cool. We're gonna see.
We're gonna see it in 3 weeks.
Like,
it's
gonna
be amazing.
Awesome when I get to watch it.
I just read a newspaper article about it.
And I remember Richard saying to me, he goes, "These tournaments are gonna ruin jiu-jitsu. They're gonna turn them into taekwondo." And
wow.
I was like...
That's some good foresight, right?
Wow.
I was like, what? Are you crazy? No, jiu-jitsu's like, UFC.
Impossible.
Like, fighting. Yeah. He was just off by about 10 years. Like, he said he was going to do it in 10 years. It took him a little bit longer. But now, you really have tournament-style jiu-jitsu fighters and you have MMA fighters. Like,
Big difference.
When you start inverting under people in a real fight, you're going to get your head smashed in. Like, not a great idea.
And you see that mistake over and over in like live combat situations like the UFC.
And people,
you see it.
Because they used to be able to get by with it.
It's a super high-risk move.
Well, people think, they fool themselves to think, I will fight this way in a jiu-jitsu situation, but in a fight, I'm going to fight this way. And that's not the way your
muscle memory
works. Like, you run to what works for you, and you're going to start inverting or doing, some half guard BS, and you're going to get murdered. And you could see it, like the jiu-jitsu guys of the 90s. Obviously, a lot of that had to do with people who hadn't caught up to jiu-jitsu yet, but like from 90s to the 2000s, jiu-jitsu guys dominated the sport. Obviously, the sport's evolved. Everybody does jiu-jitsu now,
for sure.
So that's a big part of it too. But like, you remember back in the day, like a guy who came out of the World Championships would already be like a blue chip prospect, like into the UFC. Now it's like maybe mentioned on the broadcast when he goes to fight, because it doesn't really necessarily mean anything anymore, because a lot of that jiu-jitsu just doesn't translate to a fight.
And like we do obviously B2 grappling series. We have we're going to be here in Orlando, but it's also the same. Like a lot of these MMA guys, when they come over to the mat, it's like I'm an MMA guy, and you see him just get wrecked. You know, I mean, so it's a two-way street.
It's a different sport. It's two different sports.
There's shades of it, but it's different. Yeah, 100% agree.
Well, and just like gi and no gi, you know, they're very similar, but they're not the same. Like, I've given up the gi a long time ago. I haven't put a gi on, other than for promotion ceremonies and pictures. I haven't rolled in a gi in probably 13, 14 years.
You know what?
Good for you.
Sad thing, I've never owned a gi.
He said he doesn't even have a belt. He's a
but
white belt.
I'm a catch wrestler.
Well, the Brazilians started this thing where they say the gi makes you more technical, and I don't believe that for a second. Like, you know, I don't know if you caught my little Brazilian accent when I said technical, but technical. But I don't believe that for a second. It's like you train for the sport you're going to do.
Yeah.
You know,
okay.
like,
Exactly.
Does softball make you more technical for baseball?
I would think not.
No.
You don't know.
I don't know where that whole line of thinking came.
Yeah, I think I know where it comes from. I think it comes from a financial institution.
Yes.
Trust me, bro. This would be better if you paid me $150.
Direct withdrawal into my account is.
You'll be much better technically, and I will be much more financially secure.
Well,
Technically, I'll be richer.
Exactly.
This is going to create some waves. I mean, this whole thing is going to
I
create
think
some
it's
waves.
right.
I have nothing to do with
Yay.
this. So
You orchestrated this.
the one thing that, like, when I look at you and what you've got going here, the one thing that impresses me the most is about people in general, especially yourself, is relationships and how they form, the trust, the bond, just the love that a coach gives to a student, and the student's like desire to be or do what it is their coach says. Justin Chim Chim Garcia is one of those guys that I kind of see with yourself. Can you expand on your relationship with him as well as what impresses you the most with him?
Justin's, you know, he walks in the gym. First of all, the guy's back then, he's 5'5".
Yeah, he's super short.
5'5".
Yeah.
Like he's a little fire plug of a dude. He came in, and we just hit it off. I was training up in New York at the time. I moved to Florida, and we just hit it off. And
where did you meet him at that?
We were training at a Helson school in the Bronx.
Okay.
A Helson network in the Bronx, I should say.
Okay.
And we just hit it off. He had some wrestling and judo in his background, and he was a quick learner. So he very quickly and
a stud wrestler.
Yes, and the school we trained at, pretty much it was a new location, so there wasn't very many. I was a purple belt at the time. There wasn't very many people for me to train with, like competitive. Justin got good very quickly, so it very quickly became me and him sparring like all the time.
So you go to the gym, you on your way to the gym, you'd be like, man, him again.
It was just, and then we'd meet on the days because it wasn't open every day. Because back then the guy who owned it, he had a real job, so it was only open, X number of days a week. Yeah. So like I had a key, so me and him would meet on days off, and we would just train. And he's free. I mean, he squats like 700 pounds, 800 pounds.
But he's only got to lift it.
I know. He only has
feet off the ground.
He's a small place to move, but it's still a lot of weight to move. Like I couldn't pick it up off the rack, but he's a really good athlete. He was a very good football player in college, and he picked it up real fast, and we just hit it off. And I'll give you the funny story about him. He joined. Say 1 week, right? And I barely knew him. I met him, and he was just some stocky dude.
You get to know people quick on that mat. Yeah.
Well, no, it was like the next week. It was like the Nagas had just started, and the Grapples Quests, and those things had just started. So this was around 99, 2000-ish, and I go up to a Naga, and I'm coaching a couple guys that day, and I look over and I see this guy. He looks familiar, and I'm like, where do I know this guy from? I walk over, I'm like, yo, I know you. Where do I know you from? He's like, I was in your class the other day. I just joined your school. And I'm like, wait, you just joined on Monday?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, I know.
He's competing?
I'm like, it's Saturday. He's like, yeah. I'm like,
you had a good session.
You're competing?
Yeah, had a good week.
He's like, he had like 2 classes. And I'm like, you're competing? He goes, yeah. I'm like, I'm up next. So I'm like, you want me to coach you? He's like, yeah, sure. So I coach him. He winds up making it to like the finals.
What?
Yeah.
He's a freak athlete.
I mean, the guy's an athlete, and he was a good wrestler. He was taking people down.
Okay, good wrestler.
And high on that IQ.
You know, high school, didn't wrestle in college or anything, but like
Still.
high school wrestler. And you know, he just, but still, the guy, I was like very impressed. He competed on his like second class. Like went up there and he didn't even do like the beginner, like he did like the intermediate division. And it was like,
might as well.
this guy's got a set.
I would have guessed that he wrestled in college. He never wrestled it.
No, he wrestled in high school.
That actually makes it even more impressive.
I think it was only 1 year in high school too.
Jesus.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Because he's known for his wrestling, his base,
his
wrestling
takedown.
base.
Yeah, he's well again. He's,
St. Pierre, he didn't really wrestle.
yeah, St. Pierre didn't wrestle.
Yeah, but you're talking about like freak elite, you know.
Yeah,
Wow.
don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure I only wrestled 1 year in high school.
Take us through his Abu Dhabi experience.
So he you know, years later, now we're training all the time together. He got good at lightning speed, and so now it's for the 05 Abu Dhabi. I guess the trials were in 04. They were in like Nova Scotia. Like,
Sounds like fun.
who's the genius who put this thing in like the most faraway land to get to? So I'm like, Jim, I can't go coach you. I can't drop the
I'm
tickets
busy
to
that day.
Nova Scotia.
A lot of the referees.
Not Nova Scotia. I'm sorry. It was like the other side of Canada, like the western side of Canada. Like
Okay.
it was some like literally you have to be dropped off by like a biplane type of play. It was I forgot the name of the place, but it was absurdly far. So Chim goes and he meets one of the Avalon brothers in the finals. A very close match. I think it was like 2-0 or 4-2 or something like that. So I think it was Marcus. So
Very talented, both of those two.
Marcus and David are very talented.
Yeah.
And David, I think, was already got a bye because he had placed the year before or something. I forget. I don't think David even had to qualify, but Marcus did, and Marcus decides to win this weight class, but then drop a weight class for the tournament.
Right.
And it's like, wait a minute, how could you do that now?
Yeah.
Like you wanted this weight class.
Listen, man, there's you can't try to make sense of
No,
things that happen in Abu
and
Dhabi.
I love Mark.
You just got to accept it. Okay, this is
Move
ridiculous,
on.
but let's just get past it. Okay.
So we petition then if Marcus is not representing that weight class, Chim should. And you know, we bitched and moaned, and they're like, no, sorry, no. And they
Who
just
are we talking to? Miguel Arate?
yeah, no, I don't remember if that. Maybe it was. It was so long. It was back in
Another New York
We'll
guy?
say
I'm not sure. I think it might have been. It might.
Miguel. Yeah.
And I'm like, how does he not get the spot then if was the runner-up? You know, and they just gave it to some random dude, and that they wanted to give it to, and it was like, are you serious? And then like 4 days before the tournament, we get a call, and they're like, Chim can have the spot above the weight class above, which is Hodger's spot.
That's what always happens. It's never what you want, but you got to say yes.
So I'm like, you know, Chim of course jumped at it, but now, like, you know, he's 5'5" fighting in Hodger Gracie's weight division. He's like tiny compared to these dudes. You know, it's funny though, like, so that you know, the night before they come out with the brackets, and we were late for the bracket thing. So we're walking down the hallway to go see the brackets, and like people are coming back. The the meeting's over. The brackets are put up, and people are going by like saying, "Hey, bro,
sorry,
it's just an honor that you even made it, man. It's just an honor." And then
so it's good.
The next guy come by said the same thing, bro. You got to the big show. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
And like after like 4 of them, we're like, Hodger. You got Hodger in the first round.
Yeah,
like sure enough, it was Hodger. You know.
Yeah.
And so Chim got it like. You know,
so he picked out a casket, before the event. You know, he just
we were
wanted
just
to make
laughing.
sure.
At that point, we were just like I said,
What's the worst that could happen?
I didn't even have a school. I was just teaching him like out of somebody else's school in New York. Like, we were just happy to be there. You know, it was just a great experience to be there, and it was a blast. And you know, of course, he got Hodger. He actually took him down with a really nice high crotch, which went downhill from there. But it was really nice that he got a takedown.
He went into that match without hesitation. Like he went in there like he was this is it. Like he had to earn it.
Oh yeah. No. Plus, sometimes I think like in situations like that where you have nothing to lose, like
that's better.
It's
sometimes.
even better.
Yeah.
It's like nobody expects you to do anything anyway.
We talked about that middle game, that The pressure, that's gone.
The pressure's gone in that
That's gonna
situation.
shock the world. It's fun.
It's
the pressure is on the opponent.
Exactly.
Like,
100%.
Yeah.
It's defending the championship that's hard. It's not the challenger has a little bit easier road with the mental game, I think.
Okay, so that was your first experience with Abu Dhabi. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay, another experience you had was with obviously Matt Arroyo, who is still, like, I think he's coaching for you now. Am I correct?
Matt runs the South School. Yeah, Matt only has his own school in South Tampa.
Okay.
And we've been together. We've been partners and doing stuff together. We put out videotapes together and
Wrote a book as well.
wrote a book
All right,
and all
so
that stuff.
how did you meet Matt? How did you guys come together?
So when I first moved to Florida, before I had a school, I had been introduced by my friend Jon Burke, the guy who introduced me to jiu-jitsu. He had two friends in Tampa who had done jiu-jitsu, or do jiu-jitsu, and he was like, look, I'll put you together with these guys. So when I first moved to Tampa, I met these two guys who had experience, and they started training with me. They were training at a different school. They came over to me, and I get a call from this guy, and he's like, hey, my friend, Gary Govell, I believe the guy's name was, had a school up in upstate New York, who I had done some seminars for when I was living in New York. And he's like, my friend Gary Govell, I trained with him when I was up in New York. I'm down at University of Tampa. He says, you're moving, you're here now. I want to train with you. My name's Matt Arroyo. So I said, yeah, well, come over. I don't have a school. We're training in my friend's office. Like, we push all the furniture to the side, put down like those fold-out mats.
Put the couch up, standing straight up against the wall.
This is October of '04, so I didn't have a school yet. Just rolled out the mats, and the three of us were rolling. Now it was four. And what's funny was, so Matt started with that, and we became instant friends.
And what belt was he at that time, in your opinion?
He was wearing a blue. He was a very, very, very beginner blue belt.
Okay.
Like, very beginner at that point. But what was funny was, like, I don't know exactly when it was, if it was a year later or within a year. He's like, hey, you want to see a video of me getting my blue belt from Hoyce? Because he actually got it from Hoyce at a seminar. So I'm like, yeah, let's put it in.
That's it then, right?
So he puts in the seminar, he puts in the video of the seminar, and I'm watching this, and sure enough, he's getting his blue belt, and there in the back of the video is a picture of me being very annoyed that he has to wait through this promotion ceremony.
Ridiculous.
Like, rolling his eyes, like, do I still have? I want to go home. It's late. I got a 2-hour drive.
Who's this nerd? Come on.
Yeah, like, just put it on. Let's go. And
Sorry,
it was me. It was like, it's like, that's you in the background, and you could just see I did not want to be there at all anymore. I wanted to go home. And,
Been a long day.
And so it was funny enough. I was there when Matt got his blue belt. I just didn't know it was Matt. And so we laugh about that to this day. Like,
and you guys are still obviously together in regards to partners with the gym.
we still do a bunch of stuff together. Yeah, Matt runs the South Gym. That's like his thing. But we do video stuff together, and I mean, we speak. Me, him,
Daily,
and his wife are like the three amigos.
That's cool. Okay, so Matt obviously comes to you doing grappling, with jiu-jitsu, and then he decides to transition to mixed martial arts. How does that conversation go with you?
We like I said, I opened up in 05. I'm sorry, late 04, but 05 kind of started the MMA stuff. And I'll be honest, like, it was new to me. I mean, I had boxing experience, and I had MMA or jiu-jitsu experience, but like the MMA training at the Gracie Academy at that point was basically like slap fighting on the ground, and the wrestling was subpar, compared to the
Today.
level of wrestlers that you see even at that point. And also, like, I don't know if you guys remember the first party of the wrestlers really brought a certain intensity to MMA.
Mental, too.
Mental toughness, intensity, and cardio that wasn't present earlier.
I agree.
Elio Gracie's jiu-jitsu is, to me, I think, the super effective for self-defense because it doesn't work under time limits. Like, if I don't have a time limit, I can relax and let the other guy burn some energy. It's great, but under like a UFC situation where you have 3 5-minute rounds, you got to win that round, and that pace. You could see in the early part of that, or the mid to late '90s, when the wrestlers started coming in, they were putting a pace on that jiu-jitsu guys just weren't used to.
Hey, well, here. What about the rule changes against wrestlers that you would see like in the early jiu-jitsu tournaments? Like, they'd be like, well,
No
no takedowns
headbutts.
are no longer more points. Like like in some tournaments they'd have like points for a takedown, and then it's, well, the wrestlers are dominating a lot of the Brazilians, so we're going to take those points away.
Well, see, I'm okay with that in the tournaments because if it's a submission grappling tournament, the byproduct should be a submission.
Oh, okay. So do you think BJ Penn would have been the first American to win a Brazilian tournament if that rule had been intact at that time? BJ, they said, just kept taking people down and letting them up. I haven't seen.
I didn't see it.
I haven't either.
I can't judge them.
But they call, like, a lot of the guys say it's the BJ Penn rule.
Really?
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I heard he won it on advantage. I don't know.
I'm only telling you what people. I have not watched it either, so I'm probably wrong.
I'm more of a purist in a way as what you're saying. Like, I remember that submission underground, whatever Chael's thing won. He called me and asked me, or he texted me. He's like, "Hey, I got an opportunity for you. Here was his message. It was Jake Shields. This date, no money." I'm like, pfft. I said, "Well, is there any point system?" He's like, "No, EBI rules." I was like, "All right, I'll do it." You know, it's like, because I don't like the point. I want there to be a submission or nothing. You know what I mean? Like it's
and
not
it changes the way you look at the match.
You don't try to just hold me down, and I don't like that. You know, that's not really jiu-jitsu to me.
And you won't go for certain things because
you won't do anything. Why would you?
Because then you're gonna get out of position. Like you're not gonna take a chance of losing the points.
I don't think that's like your friend said a long time ago. He's kind of right. I don't like the point system structure. I'm not a fan of. I mean, it is what it is, but that's not really what I consider the real jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I agree.
When he told me that, I was like, sure, I'll do it. But before then, I was like, I'm not doing a point thing where somebody's going to try and outpoint you. That's not. No.
So Matt goes on The Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah, it's a purple belt.
As a purple belt.
Yeah.
As a coach, what expectations did you have of him?
I really thought Matt was going to do well. Like, obviously, in a perfect world, I would have liked a few more years with him before he went on there. But, you know, you take the...
Think about that. Years with an S.
You know, you take... I mean, because Matt really only had, you know, what, 3 years of training at that point or something like that. No boxing experience before he started training with us. No wrestling experience in high school.
Wild.
Like, you know, he was really a pure jiu-jitsu guy with, you know, a little bit of boxing thrown in there. And he did really well. I think he won his three fights on the show, and then he hurt his rib. He had the, you know, and then he won on the
against John Colossi.
Yeah, on the and got submission of the night.
Yeah, I think he armbarred him.
Yeah, off the cage. It was nice.
He's from Doolin Valley too, though. That's the reason I know that. It's the only reason. There's no encyclopedic memory. I just remember that because I knew the guy he was fighting.
It was a great night in Vegas for us when Matt won. You know, so I knew Matt was going to do well. I mean, he's superbly talented and gifted and hardworking, and I knew he was going to do well.
And he's done very well at the highest levels of grappling as well. Why don't you take us through his Abu Dhabi run?
Yeah, he won the trials, and you know I think he'd lost in the finals the year the prior trials, like by you know Matt's anytime Matt's lost, it's always been like, you know, like a
coin
judge's
toss.
decision or an advantage. I mean, the only guy I've ever seen actually like kind of beat Matt is what's his name, who's like the best in the world right now, the kid from Henzo's. What's one of the Danaher Death Squad?
The Death Squad, yeah.
Why can't Gordon?
Oh, you're talking about Gordon Ryan?
Gordon Ryan. Gordon Ryan.
That's well understandable.
In my opinion, I think Gordon Ryan is the latter version of yourself. That's just like the way he handles himself on social media and things of that nature. He's got an opinion, a lot of opinions, not afraid to voice them.
You really looked into my social media.
Very limited social media, I might add. Yeah, I think someone's been banned from Facebook here, and I'm not going to point any fingers.
No, I'm back on now. They let me back on.
They let you, okay. Hope you learned your lesson.
Yeah, until next time.
Yeah, no, Matt, you know, Matt, like Gordon was the only guy I've ever seen like kind of like
stud.
Like, and Gordon has done that to everybody. I mean, the kid is fantastic. But Matt's as good as anybody in the world, I think, on the ground. And he won the trials that year, and he got that wrestler, that monster wrestler. What's his name? I'm gonna mess up his name. I can't remember it. But this was the guy that year. Matt lost on. They went in overtime, And I forget if they just gave it to him on a judge's decision, or
Weird how that happens.
or maybe he got like a sudden death overtime points. But I know it went overtime. And then Keenan Cornelius had the exact same match with the guy, like almost verbatim what happened with Matt, and they gave it to Keenan. And supposedly there was a whole bunch of protests because they thought the wrestler won. Who knows?
Is there? I mean, do you really consider it an actual tournament unless there's some sort of like protest in regards to one of the decisions?
No.
It doesn't count. Like it's not supposed to be like.
Went too smooth.
Yeah, went too smooth.
You know what it is? It's like any tournament, whatever it is. Once you come up with a rule set, people are going to find a way around the rule set, like to use the rule set in their favor.
All right. This is what he just said. If these like parents of jiu-jitsu kids or these jiu-jitsu guys, if they applied that same insight to like their practical lives, they'd be phenomenal attorneys. Like you're talking about getting people out of murders, like left and right. By the way, they look at those rules and they figure their ways around it.
100%. It doesn't matter the rule set. People will find it. Like remember when Abu Dhabi first started, they didn't have that 5 minutes no point thing. Then they put it in with the goal of there being
take chances.
We could go after each other.
Yeah.
What happened?
Nobody did anything.
We played patty cake for 5 minutes until the points. Points. Okay, now I'm gonna shoot. And it's like
stuff going on.
And they got to change it. Like you've had it for like 10 years. It's time to really
worked.
take a look at it.
It was a good idea.
It was a good shot. It didn't work. You know. So I don't know what they're gonna do. How they're gonna make jiu-jitsu like or submission grappling an exciting sport to make it more of a spectator.
Yeah.
You know, because only people
It'll
watch
never
it,
be
people
on
do it.
ESPN. It'll never be on ESPN. Man.
No.
I mean, it's just you got to be resigned to that fact.
Yeah.
Now that being said, you know you've had some really good fighters in there. One thing I'm a believer of is to have a fighter, grappler, whatever it is, they have to in a way have like a delusional attitude about how good they are. They could go against somebody and just get murdered, and they're gonna have to think, I'm never going to lose again. I can beat anybody in the world. Have you noticed that with your higher level guys that they have that almost, even if you don't think, I don't know if he's going to win, they have to believe they're going to win every time.
100. Like whoever said like fighting is like 95% mental, like they got it 100% right. In fact, they might have missed a few points.
I agree.
Yeah, because like you know, in any other athletic endeavor, the better athlete will win every single time. Like whatever, if it's basketball, or if, you know, whatever. If you run a 4.240, you're going to be a great running back. Period. Like fighting is the only one where mental toughness and self-belief will carry you through. You know, how many times have you seen the better athlete just fail, just break mentally?
Often.
Because they don't believe in themselves. They don't believe that they're going to win.
And just like, how many times you go, well, if they fought 10 times, this guy probably wins 7. That's a legitimate thing that people say. If you run a race against somebody and you're fast, you're probably going to win 9 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
Like fighting though, one guy might win 5, the other might. It just depends on the
mental
aspect.
aspect of that day.
Was their camp good? What was going on? There's a lot of different factors involved.
Absolutely.
But I've always felt like the best guys are the ones who can just look. That you have to be like delusional to a certain degree of how good you are and believe it. And if not, I don't know how you get in the ring.
I agree. I forget, you know, I'm not the name drop, but you know Al Bundy at
Yeah, of course.
He's a good friend of mine. And
4 touchdowns, Polk High, bro.
Polk High, man. So
Jiu-jitsu guy, black belt.
We trained at the academy together.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And he found out about my boxing background. You want to talk about, like I said, I'm a huge boxing fan. I'm like a boxing historian. I you know, followed the sport
Speaking his language.
forever.
Oh, dude, we're friends.
Yeah, and the only guy who's ever outdone me in boxing history knowledge is Ed.
Really?
Yeah, and he was telling me a great story. I just don't remember if it was Dempsey or it was Gene Tunney. It was one of the earlier guys. He was taking a nap before his fight, like he was asleep. And like his manager trainer came in. It was like 40 minutes before his fight, and he's like, "Hey, we have a problem." And I'm like, the guy's first response, "What? The fight's still on, though, right?" Like his first thing was like, "Well, I'm still fighting tonight." Like that was like the only thing he was worried about. Like,
yeah, then it's not a problem.
Yeah, it's like if it's not that, then it's not.
On fire. I'm not worried.
Then it's not a problem. I'm going back to bed. Like,
don't bother me.
Like we're still fighting. Like. It's a very, you know, that type of mindset, that warrior mindset or gladiator mindset is Is it rare? I think it's just a rare thing in a lot of
It's
people.
genetic, yeah, and to a certain degree.
And there's degrees of it, you know. I mean, there's some guys who are just, you're just like, that dude is just game as game can be.
We did a deep dive the other day. It was at Walk. It was just so there's like, you know, who was the last guy to do a 45 round fight? What, 1911, 1910? The guy who
That's
actually
kinda my
like
era.
had like goat testicles implanted into himself. So we were going way back into some really weird boxing stuff.
Yeah, but remember, rounds back then, a round ended anytime you got
knocked
dropped.
down. Yeah,
Yeah.
knocked
So
down.
the rounds could be
Well,
quick, too.
But
So in other
that was
words,
interesting.
someone got knocked down 45 times before that.
Well,
bout.
they wouldn't get knocked down all the time. They'd be like, I need a break. Boom, take a knee.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that was back in that was a different. They were gloved though. They were wearing gloves. Back
Remember, Arroyo fought one of his own black belts, who was Diesel. He looked like a 200-pound Evander Holyfield when he was, I think, 47 years old, for 3 hours and 47 minutes straight.
That's nuts.
Uninterrupted, the longest uninterrupted fight in history. He took it on a week's notice, and he fought 3 hours and 47
He's just
minutes.
fight ready. All right, so
Like,
you
Elio's definitely a samurai. He's definitely one of those guys.
So you guys have talked about the mental aspect of fighting in boxing, obviously. So Lou Duva said that the lower level belts, even the regional little boxing belts, the minute somebody wins one of those, it's not like that they get better physically. They're the same fighter, but mentally they perform 30% better, and it's because they start having a belief in themselves. Do you take any of your students like through those small little tournaments to kind of, because you know there's more potential than that they have in them than they actually believe?
Well, yeah. I mean, you would. I'm a big believer in getting, as much experience under your belt before you take those big jumps, like we were talking about before. Throwing somebody into deep water, especially the big like Matt, for example, like that was a big jump. He had a couple fights before
Deep water.
and then all of a sudden he's in
And
the
you
UFC.
threw him up against Matt Brown early too.
Well, that was a mistake.
But Matt's record was so ugly at the time.
I fought him right, but not because he had a bad record. I was like, this guy's tough as hell.
Yeah. Well, what happened I think it was Matt's second fight, my Matt, and we were at the weigh-ins. Matt wasn't even fighting. Like, he wasn't supposed to be fighting. They're like,
But then
hey,
you got Matt Brown with a beat-up record, and you're like, okay.
Well, yeah, and he's
11-6.
he's skinny. He doesn't look like that much to look at in terms of like, thick dude. And they're like, hey, this guy's in from, I forgot what town. Ohio.
Yeah, Cleveland.
And,
Columbus.
And he wants to fight. Does Matt want to fight? We looked at his record and I was really on the fence because we didn't do any, like Matt we didn't train. He wasn't supposed to be on the card that night. And it was like, yeah, screw it, let's just do it. And I'm like, back of my head, I'm like, I don't know, this could be a mistake, And Matt went out, and I'll give him, Matt, I thought, won pretty easily the first round, but he was throwing everything at Matt Brown and exhausting himself.
Yeah, you can only throw so many fastballs.
He was throwing
That's tough as
everything.
nails.
Okay, but that
And
comes with experience.
Matt's tough as nails. And Matt was a much smarter fighter. He saved his energy. Second round, Matt did the same. My Matt did the same thing. He just went out, guns blazing. You couldn't get him to relax because he was his second.
It's
MMA
experience.
fight.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was his second, but I'm pretty sure it was his second. And then the third round, like I could tell in the corner, like Matt was just done. Like he had that nervous energy. It just plus the energy was burning in there.
Adrenaline dump.
Done. He was done, and he went out and he went out on his shield, but like, that stuck in Matt's craw. So when we got into the UFC after he beat what's his name, the guy you mentioned,
Jack Lassie.
they asked us who we wanted for the next one, and Matt was like, "I want Matt Brown." Like,
Really?
Yeah, he asked for that fight, and Matt Brown is as tough as you.
But he got better. Matt Brown got better.
Yes.
Like, as tough as he was then, like, there was, like, Matt Brown would never be in the UFC if it wasn't for the Ultimate Fighter, and he went in as a body
Matt Brown
because of his record.
Matt Brown is what we're talking about in terms of mental toughness.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
if you do the math on athleticism and like pure like skills and punching power and submission ability and all that stuff, the math doesn't work out for Matt Brown.
No.
But you put him in the ring or the cage, you got an animal.
It's a different
the
language.
The guy's an animal. The guy doesn't believe he's going to lose, and there's he's like Freddy, like Jason Voorhees.
Keeps coming.
Just keep coming after you.
Myers.
So that's the perfect example of somebody who doesn't add up in the MMA math.
Okay,
You know?
so you're, I mean, obviously we've dealt a lot with the grappling side of the world. We're starting to get into the mixed martial arts portion. You also had a couple guys on Tough, one of which was Billy
Quarantillo, yeah.
Quintillo?
Yeah.
Oh, man, all right.
I might be getting it wrong too.
Yeah,
actually,
one of us
but
is right.
Quarantillo, I
Or
believe.
maybe you're both wrong.
Yeah, right.
So that's why we call him Billy Q.
Okay, so how did your relationship with him begin?
Billy actually came from Buffalo, and he, believe it or not, he somehow, it's one of those weird things.
You keep drawing people from New York, though. Have you noticed that?
Well, yeah, but Buffalo's, they're more
Buffalo's
Canadian.
what?
You're
Yeah.
not considering that?
No, they're Canadian.
I think Buffalo's closer to Indianapolis than it is
New York
than it is
City,
New York
yeah.
City. Seriously, we drove there like 7 hours or something.
Yeah, it's definitely closer then. It's
that
like
nuts?
it's like a 9-hour drive or
Yeah.
an 8-hour drive from New York. Billy had already, believe it or not, had, you know, because we had gotten a lot of guys on Tough. He was a big fan. He was a kid. He watched a lot of the Tough, and he wanted to move to Florida. And he already had ideas of moving to Tampa and training with me. And then, sure enough, I'm up in upstate New York for a fight with Corey Hill, rest in peace. And
Oh, wow, yeah.
and so it was Corey Hill, and I think we had another guy on the card too. And they wanted to interview me, and it was like one guy was going, and then there was a fight, and then Corey was going, because I think Corey was the main event. He was fighting, what's his name, the Muay Thai guy. I forgot his name. You know if I mentioned him, but I can't think of his name. But I had one fight in between, and they
That's not easy.
decide like in the middle. They don't tell me. They decide they want to do an interview with me in the ring. Like,
Oh, no.
in between, and like my one fight's over, and now I'm like walking out, and they're like, "Hey, Rob, why don't you come up? We want to talk to you." And I'm like, "No," and I think they thought I was kidding, and I walked into the back room to get Corey ready, and they're waiting for me to do this interview, and I'm
Really?
like, and Billy was there. I don't even remember this, so I'm going on Billy, what Billy said. So Billy, you know, when he came down, started training. One day he came up, he goes, "You don't remember that time in Buffalo when you like walked in the locker room and didn't come back for the interview?" And I'm like, "No, I don't. I was
Well, you're a coach first.
trying to get
Yeah,
Corey
you're a
ready
coach
for
first.
fight." Yeah.
Yeah.
And
You
after
know, they
that,
said prima donna.
Billy packed up and he moved down, and he moved into South Tampa, so he trains mostly with Matt. But I mean, Billy is unfortunately.
You guys draw a lot of that New York talent down to Florida, though. You've got a tendency to do
when
that.
you're in Florida, there is just a lot of New Yorkers down there. You know. I mean, New York is made up. Florida is made up of mostly New Yorkers anyway. But yeah, we do seem to get a lot of New Yorkers down. But Florida itself is a lot of New Yorkers. I mean, it's very rare to meet a Floridian who's
From
actually
Florida.
From Florida. So,
It's not happening. No. No one's from here.
you know. But Billy had a great fight the other night. I mean, that kid was just really, really good. Billy was on a nice winning streak, and that kid was very, very good the other night. But Billy will be back.
Yeah, Billy's got a target on him. You know, people need. You know, they're trying to get through him in order to make a name for themselves.
Billy's one of
He's
those
legit.
guys. Unless he gets punched in the face really hard, and he doesn't get started. Like, he is the prototypical like warrior brawler. He
All right.
likes to fight.
So I first heard, well, I knew of you, obviously, you know, with your jiu-jitsu experience and stuff like that, but you started reappearing, like, on my radar when I would listen, like, I got Sirius XM, Howard Stern gets over there. I'm like, yes, you know, finally uncensored.
Huge Stern.
Yeah, me too, huge. And you would go on Bubba the Love Sponge show. And
Still
Brent,
good friends with Bubba.
Okay, so Brent Hatley would drop your name, like, whenever he could. How does that relationship start? Because that was like a good commercial for you.
Oh yeah! Oh my God! Yeah. I mean, in fact, it was weird because like sometimes I go on Bubba's show, and me and Bubba, like I said, me and Brent became really good friends. Me and Bubba became really good friends, but like Bubba gave me kind of carte blanche. Like I just go on the show, they put me on the mic.
And this was a huge show, Chris. I mean, like, we're in the Midwest. Like, we never got it until I heard it on Sirius. I had no idea how huge Bubba was.
Bubba's huge. Well, he was huge just in Tampa, but when he went out on Sirius, he became huge all over the country. Like, for example, I remember one time I was on Bubba's, and Bubba, like, would give me carte blanche. I'd get the mic on, he'd leave my mic on, and he never told, like, I'd never have to leave. Like, I could stay there the whole show, and I could just be part of the, you know.
Okay, so how did you meet them?
So my friend Monster Lobster, Alan Berube,
AKA
oh my
Monster
gosh,
Lobster. Yes.
Monster, was a Tampa fixture.
They really liked him, and like they had a good relationship. So he's the one that brought you in.
He brought me on. Bubba wanted to see what it looked like when somebody got choked unconscious.
Oh,
so
nice.
they brought me on the show, and I choked a bunch
Exhibit
of
A.
people on the
You
air.
choked a bunch of people?
Yeah, on air, because Bubba wanted to see what it looked like to see somebody unconscious, and me and Bubba just hit it off. So then one time, the second time I go on the show, me and Monster are sitting in the green room, and they have it all mic'd up and wired, and they send in this dude.
Let me interject real quick. He would have this green room mic'd up and would never tell anybody. So people would be having their conversations and they're not understanding that everything is recorded. And you'd come in and he'd be like, "Remember when you said this?" Because it's it's a safe zone. I can say whatever I want. And then he'd hit play and he'd be like, "Oh,
wow!"
And it was
man.
radio
That's a dirty
gold.
trick.
Yeah.
So go ahead. I apologize. Just I want to kind of keep everybody where it's at.
So this guy comes in wearing like a thong, like with the headphones on, and he's asking Alan questions. Alan, like I said, Alan and Bubba had gone back a bit, so they were friends. So they were really screwing with Alan. Like I said, it was the second time I was meeting Bubba, and Bubba's like feeding this guy questions to ask Alan. And they started out as annoying and like, trying to jab Alan.
They progressively got worse.
But Alan was going through a tough time. It was like during, the 08 or 07, when the real estate crisis hit.
Oh, yeah, like 08.
Monster's businesses his restaurants were not doing well. He was struggling.
Not so
he was
funny.
his ex, he was going through a divorce.
Oh,
Like he had a lot of personal stuff.
Anything
Horrible
else can you
stuff.
add on there?
Yeah, like, so, Monster like takes a great joke. But like this dude started like through Bubba, like it was funny at one part. Like I knew this guy was being fed his information. You
Yeah.
could just tell. But at one point, you could see Alan's getting madder, and the guy, and you could see the guy's like looking at Alan. He's like, "No, I'm not gonna ask that." Yeah. Like he just, and then you could almost hear Bubba
it's
going,
a bad
"You
idea.
asked that goddamn
you
question,
gotta ask it.
or
It's a
you're
really
fired."
bad idea.
So he asked Alan. He's like, "Hey, do you think the reason why your wife's leaving you is because of your failed restaurants?" Or it was something like really nasty, and it was like Alan just lost his shit. Oh, can I say shit?
Yo, you say whatever you want,
Okay.
bro. We're good.
So he jumps up and starts pummeling the dude.
Yes, what he's supposed to do.
And-
He did exactly what he was supposed to do.
And I'm just sitting there. I didn't even get up from the couch.
You didn't get up the shot.
No.
Hey,
And
get what's coming to you.
You're not
Take
gonna
your
break
medicine.
it up. Nothing.
Take your
Nothing.
medicine.
It is what
No,
it is.
it's like I felt like
that's an experienced trainer.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I
I bet his arms were crossed just like this.
I felt like he had it coming. So I all of a sudden the door blows open. It's Brent and Bubba and everybody, and they're pulling Alan off the guy. And Bubba looks at me. He's like, "Why didn't you break it up?" And I'm like, "I felt he deserved it."
Yeah.
Like
I was about to get hit in my stomach.
I was fine with it,
That's good.
and like me and Bubba became friends after that, and he just started giving me like he knew I was such a Stern fan. This is how cool Bubba is.
Yeah.
He was going up to go on the Stern show. He brought me with him, and I got
You
to
got
go
your
on this.
picture with Howard?
No, because Howard doesn't leave the studio, so I wasn't allowed in the studio, like
That's
the
not by
actual
design.
studio.
Okay.
Howard's nuts. Like he's
He's
freaking
germ-phobic. all that.
germaphobe.
Yeah,
In fact,
yeah.
we did a tour the night before of Howard's studio, and it was so funny because like I know Howard from 30 years of listening to him.
Of course, me too.
So
Yeah.
like Bubba knows Howard. Like we were all big fans of Howard. So somebody's taking us to the studio, and we get to like Howard's desk. It's like right there.
Did you sit
and
in the
like,
chair?
And and they're like, "There's Howard's desk," and all of us were like,
Who's first?
"No, we're not getting any closer to that." Like, God forbid.
Did they warn you not to sit in the chair?
No, nobody had
Ah,
to. Nobody had to. Like
I
we
went
all
to-
knew.
dude,
Like
that's one time.
no, because
It's like putting on a Pope's hat. You're at the Vatican. Let me just-
you'll be the
Out. Yeah.
You'll be screwed.
Black mold.
Yeah. Because he screams about it on his show, like my chair.
I saw his
moved."
microphone. The
Yeah.
thing he does. It's sitting there on his desk, and it was just like, all right, this is as close as I'm getting to that desk. I am not going to be responsible for even anything happening to that
Yeah.
desk. So the next day, I got to hang out with Sal and Richard, and it was all because of Bubba. He was just cool as hell. He
He knew you were a fan and
knew
looked
I
out
was a
for
fan,
you.
brought me up to New York. He brought me on America's Got Talent with him. I got to sit next to Howard's wife for the whole show.
That's
Like
cool.
for a lifelong fan of from New York, fan of Stern. It was a really cool experience, and Howard all.
You had to go to Florida to make that happen.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I got to meet Howard once, and this is funny. I'm not really an MMA story, but I'm so nervous because I don't fanboy out in front of too many people, but Howard Stern is clearly like.
I'm in. Yeah.
So I'm holding my thing. Howard comes up to us. I'm sitting next to his wife, who couldn't be any sweeter, and Bubba's sitting here. And Howard comes up during the break of America's Got Talent. He's like, "Hey, we got 20 minutes. Let's go talk in the dressing room." So Bubba gets up and he's like, "Come on, let's go." And I'm like,
Me?
like, I don't know if I should. Oh, okay. So like, I'm
Yeah,
not gonna
for
miss that.
sure. Yeah.
So as we're going, one of the America's Got Talent like people were asking Howard questions. They were doing like an interview with him, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, this is crazy. I'm about to be like, as I'm focused so much about to be thinking about what's going to happen, like what I'm going to say to this guy I've been listening to for 30 years, I drop my Sprite right in the middle of the interview, like sprays all over the place.
You just got to point at someone else at that point.
No, it was clearly me. There was nobody else to point at.
I knocked it out of my hand.
You were like, yeah.
And Howard does one of these, like he's talking to the camera and he just goes, and goes back and I'm like,
All right, Bubba. Take care, buddy.
That was my
I'll go back to
shot.
my chair.
that was my shot. I'm done.
All right, so you wrote a book called BJJ Manifesto.
Yes.
And I kind of take from it, like Chris and I, we got, Lights Out podcast. We talk about there's different components and aspects of coaching. And there's coaches and there's poachers. Guys that are like big game hunters, in locker rooms trying to grab guys. And then there's people that bring people from the white belt to the black belt. I consider you a coach, and both are necessary. You have to have both in the sport. So,
absolutely.
do you consider yourself a coach? I mean, let me rephrase that. As a coach, how much does that mean to you when you see a student come from the white belt and bring them all the way up to a black belt, rather than having to borrow students from other people in order to get to that level?
I don't want to borrow students. Like I really enjoy. In fact, I still teach all my beginner classes. I love the beginner classes. I love that look in the student's eye when you like show them that little component that makes their game move better, that little piece that they've been struggling with. They haven't been able to get the triangle because of this little detail, and you give it to them, and then all of a sudden something snaps. Even with some of the higher belts, they'll be like, I've seen you teach that move like 10 times, and I've seen you teach that move like 10 times, and I never caught that little detail.
Uh-huh.
And then now that I've caught it, it's worked for me like...
It's a game of inches.
Little details make things
It's literally a game of inches.
Absolutely
And
is.
to the untrained eye, they're just like, But people that are into the sport are like, they're like lusting for it. The knowledge.
Well, going back to the manifesto, the whole point of that book was, I feel like jiu-jitsu as an art, it's kind of settled into, like, you show up on Monday, you learn the triangle. And then Tuesday you learn the armbar, and then Wednesday you learn the omoplata, and Thursday you learn whatever. And you start learning these moves in a vacuum. But nobody really puts the grease between the gears to show you, okay, well, I know an armbar now. It's great if a guy just leaves his arm sitting there, I'm going to get it. How do I consistently get a guy to leave his arm there like that? To me, that's the strategy of jiu-jitsu. How do you create strategies to create traps to get the guy to do what you want? You can't force moves. You have to force mistakes. And that to me is what jiu-jitsu. That's really the beauty of jiu-jitsu. That's what jiu-jitsu does.
It's the dance.
Better.
It's the dance. Yeah. And it's such an important part of the dance. And like the outlook that you had on jiu-jitsu was so much different than what had been previously written or even really talked about. When you start talking about grease in between the gears and setting traps and bothering somebody in order to kind of distract them from somewhere else, to do something else, like, I hadn't seen that up until this point. Like, it was very impressive. Like,
thank you. And I live it. I believe it. I still do it to this day. In fact, I've been thinking about putting out a sequel to that book because, believe it or not, that book came out like 12 years ago.
It was like a $50 price point. You sold a ton of them.
Yeah, we did. We sold a lot in the first couple of years. We sold a ton. And then, but I've come up with so many new strategies and
analogies, like life lessons. Yeah.
From 12 years ago till now, that I'm really thinking about just a matter of sitting down and putting. It's so much harder to write a book than I thought it was going to be. Like, first of all, I can't type, so like Arroyo's got to do the typing.
You're on your phone.
I'm like this. Then we started doing like the audio thing. and then you don't speak the way you write. So then you have to go back and edit it to fix it,
The words
to make
go
it
wrong,
sound
too.
like, because you sound like a complete idiot. Like when you read the words, the way you
These
say
guys, those
yeah,
guys.
it's like, oh God. Plus my New York accent just picks up like really weird on those things, and so it didn't shrink the time to write the thing.
When Dems do this,
It didn't shrink it at all. Like I might as well just typed it myself. But Matt did the typing and we got it out. But I think we're gonna do another one. Hopefully this year we're gonna put it out.
All right. So when we close out our interviews, we always like opinions of like your opinion of certain people in your organization. You've got a long list of black belts that you've given out, and we just kind of want like a little quick synopsis of each guy that we mentioned, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
Robby Donofrio is one of them.
Yes, one of the most naturally gifted grapplers I've ever met. Like, he's one of these guys who he can. There's one thing about being flexible, but there's another thing about having dexterity.
Being able to bend
He
forever.
No, like there's plenty of guys who can take their foot and pull it to their head. Robby can smack himself in the face with his foot without using his hands. Like he's got this incredible dexterity at a guy who's like 240.
Jeez, that's crazy for that.
And he's been to Abu Dhabi as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Very, very gifted grappler and great guy. Been with me for a decade and a half already.
That's wild.
But one of the most naturally gifted. If he got himself in a little better shape sometimes, I think he'd already probably have an ADCC title to his name.
Okay. How about Joe Wiseman?
Bamboo's another guy, super gifted. One of my, he's a character. Super loyal guy. Was the best man at his wedding.
Oh, nice. Nice.
One of the certainly one of the guys I would put as one of my best black belts. Him, Matt, of course, Robby, a few others I would put up there, Gabe and Anton.
How do you get the name Bamboo?
He came in with it. So the first
Sometimes names are given, right?
He came in one day. We were doing no gi already, and he didn't know I was the owner of the school. He was a blue belt from another school, and he asked me to roll. So we started rolling, and he's like, "Hey, man, you're really good."
Oh, thanks.
And I'm like,
I'm
"Thanks."
all right.
He's like, "Hey, I'm Bamboo." I'm like, "Nice to meet you. I'm Rob Kahn." He's like, "Oh, don't you?
I read
own
your
the
name
place."
before I walked into the door. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought you were. So that was my meeting with Bamboo, and we've become like brothers ever since. And super talented, super great kid.
So you mentioned Gabe when you refer to as Gabe Maldonado, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What is your experience with him?
One of the most Gabe is like one of those guys where if you punched him in the face, he would apologize for putting his face somewhere by your fist.
Hurt my knuckle.
Like he's such a nice, good guy, but very, very skilled grappler.
Yeah.
And probably the most well-rounded guy we have at the school in terms of striking
Really?
and grappling together.
Okay.
His striking is pinpoint. Like, again, making a career as a fighter is
It's not easy.
Gabe loves being a teacher. He runs a school in St. Pete, and he's doing what he loves to do. But
Awesome.
like, he could have been a really, really good MMA fighter if he wanted to be, because his striking is beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely pinpoint technical, and his jiu-jitsu is very high black, very good black belt level.
So you talk about Anton, Anton Yalch.
Yep. Yeah, Anton, another monster wrestler, stud wrestler. I mean, I've watched him just own like Division I wrestlers who've come in.
In wrestling.
In wrestling, yeah. He something I forgot what happened. Something happened in his personal life, but he had scholarships to some of the big
Really?
Division I schools.
Really?
Yeah.
For what sport?
For wrestling.
For wrestling. Come on, man. Follow along.
And for one reason or another he didn't go, but his wrestling talent is sick. And when he came in, one of the fastest learners to black belt. He actually had a
Do you
match
think
with
it's
Dean
an unfair
Thomas.
advantage?
What?
He had a match with Dean Thomas as like a purple belt.
Really?
And Dean was already, and I love Dean. I'm not.
Oh, yeah.
Dean's is not. But I mean, he scored. It was like 20-0, 30.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, do you think
As a purple
wrestling...
belt, it was crazy. I mean, Anton's that good. He's a handful. He's a freaking handful for anybody.
Now, I've noticed too, sometimes, like, wrestling is one thing, MMA, like wrestling, it's different because you got the chokes on different things. It seems like some people, I don't care if you're a D1 college wrestler and you're trying to do a grappling match, you're not going to get the takedown. Just like in UFC or whatnot, a lot of the great wrestlers don't get taken down.
Oh, yeah.
Would you say his, like, jiu-jitsu wrestling is better than all the other D1 wrestlers is?
I don't know about all the other, but it's very good. Like he's found a way to apply wrestling to jiu-jitsu very well.
Very good.
I think wrestling is an unfair advantage. Like when you grow up with wrestling for the jiu-jitsu world. Like when you...
Oh, it's definitely a head start,
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who denies that's, you know... I mean, there's so many similar attributes from wrestling. Plus, like I said, the work ethic of wrestlers, the second.
That's the number one thing to me is they've already got that ingrained in their head from the time they're tall.
Yes.
No other sport does that. Like you have a football player coming over, they're not gonna get it, man. I'm sorry, but that wrestler, if they can just learn a little transition of moves and you can take a punch, you're gonna be good.
Wrestlers put the work in.
Any other sport to a wrestler is an easy day, basically.
Hey, they put the work in. They bring their
really
lunch to work and they do the 8 hours.
Yeah,
you know, they put the work in.
It's great, and like I said, you could see it in the progression of MMA through the years. Like, you know, when Royce was fighting, like Royce comes from that Arroyo Gracie style, like relax, wait for the opportunity, I don't have a clock to worry about when he makes his mistake, and then all of a sudden the time limits came in, and it was like, you know, this crazy pace, and you would see jiu-jitsu guys just get exhausted. Like they started the fight well, but then they just couldn't keep up the pace.
I agree with you on that.
And it made jiu-jitsu guys have to go back to school on what it meant to be in condition and start learning wrestling. Like it was really the first evolution of the sport.
Sonny Parlin.
Sonny, I love Sonny to death. He's a great. Sonny, actually, I will say this. Sonny, and this is not going to sound like a compliment, but it is.
I like those compliments.
Yeah.
You know,
Let me dump on him. Well, that means you like somebody.
He's a horrible person.
And I've told him this already, so he knows. But when you meet somebody and you train with them for a while, and I'll give you an idea. Sonny moved down to Florida to train with me. I was doing seminars in Connecticut.
I'm the 10th person, but go ahead.
But it was different.
Nobody moves to train with
His
me.
airline miles
What
must
the
be
hell's
phenomenal.
going on?
But the difference is Sonny did it at as a 40-year-old man with a wife and kids.
Oh my
So it put a lot of pressure on my shoulders.
He was trying to get divorced.
Like
That's what that was.
I had kids move down to train with me, but when you're 20 and you're moving to Florida, I'm not that worried about you. When you're 40 with a wife and kids, I'm like.
That's kind of cool.
Let me test the boundaries. I bet you I can get divorced. This is how I'm going to do it. I'm moving to Tampa.
Come on.
But so when Sonny, when I first met Sonny, it was through seminars up in Connecticut, and he called me up one day and said, "I'm moving down," you know, and he came down as I think it was just about a purple belt when he moved down, but I met him as a blue belt, and you know usually when you see a blue belt move, you get an idea of how many years he's been training at that point. You get an idea of what that arc is going to be, like where he's going to be as a black belt, right? Absolutely. Well, Sonny's arc to me was like this. Sonny's arc turned out to be like this.
Really?
And I said it during his black belt ceremony. I was like, he far surpassed what I expected of him. And it just comes out as an insult.
Awesome.
But it's not.
He put the work in.
He put so much work in, and you know he busted his ass, and he achieved so much higher level that I thought he would go.
As a coach, that's your job.
Yeah, but
that's your job.
It was freakish, but I just any way I say it, I just sound like I'm insulting the guy.
I don't think so. Okay, what about Wrick Tomas?
Rick's my boy. He runs the Wesley Chapel School. Rick's been with me forever. Probably at the first location of Gracie Tampa. Absolute great things. I mean, you know, I just wrote this the other day. I feel like in jiu-jitsu at this point, you have the belt doesn't mean anything anymore. Like the lineage, who gave it to you means everything. Sure. Like, oh, you're a black belt, that's great. Who'd you get it from? Because if you don't keep your and a lot of this was instilled in me with Arroyo and Royce, and it's like you know, there's black belts out there that are just really substandard at this point. I call it the Americanization of jiu-jitsu.
It's taekwondo.
Yeah.
You pay your money.
You get your belt.
Time you get your belt. Yeah.
So it's like, you know, now it's like when you're a black belt, okay, who'd you get it from? Oh, Marcelo Garcia? Oh, you're legit. You're legit. Enzo Gracie? Got it. You're good. And I feel like I try and hold those standards at Gracie Tampa. So, because legacy is your black belts. It's the only thing really you leave in the art is the level of black belts that you leave behind. And so all my guys, like Rick is an absolute stud on the mat. He's a great dude, and he actually busted my balls really good on Facebook last night. And I hate when I get the worst of it on Facebook.
It happens.
But
you took an internet beating.
But he gave me an internet beating last night. So
it was an e-war,
I lost. I had to lay down my sword last night to him.
I'll have to look that up.
I had to lay down my sword last night and say, you got me on that one. He won.
So what about Jeff Morris?
Jeff Morris is a great guy. He's been with me a long time. He's a psychologist. He's not a guy who aspires to Abu Dhabi or anything like that. He's a moose. He's a big dude.
Yeah.
But he's been training consistent. He gets in there with all the guys who all the stud guys who do this for like a living, and never misses a class. He's more of a casual. Trains all the time.
Yeah.
But just does it for recreational hobbies and older guys.
He's a body for other people to push against.
But he's a big body.
Right.
And
super important in the gym.
Just because he doesn't compete at these tournaments or look to go to some of the higher things doesn't mean he couldn't compete at them.
He put the work in. Yep.
Yeah, he gives everybody at the school. It's not a fun day to roll with Jeff for anybody. He's a monster.
That's good.
Yeah, he's a stud.
Go for the only female here, Cristina Rodriguez.
Midget, yeah, she's
midget.
The midget.
His word, not mine.
We call her. Well, she called herself the midget. So
self-imposed.
She started with me, and she is now doing. She opened. She has her own school. She's the only female
really
that I have that has opened up her own school. She runs. She ran my kids program for a number of years.
Nice.
Now she has her own place in Tampa, down from us, and she is on top of being obviously. She was
very talented. Yeah.
When she was a pro belt, we were entering into the guys division, guys pro belt division. Yeah, she was winning.
What?
Yeah, she'd win as many as she lost. And the dudes would be so pissed.
I was going to say, I'm quitting the sport. You have to quit the sport when that happens.
Women are better with technique than men. They're more detail-oriented. There's something to be said about a woman's touch.
Yeah, she's technical as hell. And I remember how pissed those dudes were when they would get submitted by midgets.
Made you smile, huh?
And but she's so driven. Like she's the hardest worker I've ever seen.
That's phenomenal.
Really?
And now she applies it more. Like she's not as much on the mat anymore. She's not like her goals have kind of switched. She's not as much into she still trains and teaches, but her goal is to build the school and
cool.
take over the world.
That's good.
Type of thing. She's a great marketer, great internet.
That's good.
It's great because she's learned far more. Her and Matt, both of them, have learned far more than me about the internet marketing part of this business. So when I need help, I just call them now.
Smart move.
It's much easier.
How about Tony Way?
Tony's an absolute stud, and his wife is probably better than he is.
What?
No, she's.
Wow.
Brittany's going to be one of the up and coming. She was a professional jockey, and I don't know if it's because of the core strength that she had to have to ride those horses, but she's been tearing up the grappling scene the last couple of years with not that many years experience, and her and Tony are both monsters. I mean, they compete every.
Really?
Tony came down from, where did he come from? Because he came to me with experience.
I would imagine New York is for everybody.
No, it wasn't. It was,
Florida.
It was
I'm coming to Florida for you.
It was a Midwest, I think, spot, and Tony's excellent black belt, and but Brittany is you could see is just going to be like she's going to be in Abu Dhabi like within the next.
Wow.
That's gotta be so
Tony's got
exciting as
that
a
chance
coach.
too, but I'm sure Brittany's going to wind up in Abu Dhabi. She's a little thing. She's probably going to be at the 115-pound division, or whatever, 105, whatever it is. But she's going to be in Abu Dhabi for sure.
I think that to be a jockey, don't you have to be like 119 with all the gear?
Something like that.
She had to be probably like 100,
110,
105, man.
105.
I mean, because saddle, everything. I think you have to.
Yeah.
Has to weigh under 120, I think. But
and I think she just went back to it a little bit, like because she gave it up, and then I think she just started doing it a little bit on the side, but because she wasn't just like a jockey, like she was like.
That doesn't seem like an easy way to make money, I might add.
But I think when you make that like higher tier, and you're a wanted jockey, like you're a successful one.
But don't they compete against men? There's no like gender difference in regards to
what
riding
would that matter? It's a horse riding.
Yeah, as long as you're winning, I don't think they care.
That's wild.
But like she was, I believe, like a well-regarded jockey. So
really?
She ran in some pretty big.
That's such an interesting story, man. Yeah. So I know we're taking up a lot of your time. Jeff Fleming.
Jeff is my striking coach. He's been with me forever. He got his black belt through the Anasanto system, and he's black belt with me now. Obviously, he's been with me for pretty much all the 17 years I've been down in Tampa.
Wow.
And just couldn't.
You really settled in here. Like you've really just dug in Florida.
Oh yeah. I'm a Floridian now. Like I dug in my first year here. Like I went back up for a seminar in February, and I was like, who would live in this home? Forget that.
What's that white thing falling from the sky?
I'm getting back to Florida. This is crazy.
Blood thin,
absolutely freezing. So I like 1 year, I'm done. Yeah.
Hey, well, Rob, I got to tell you, we really appreciate you taking your time. I know we've asked you 1,000 questions.
No,
but we just like to hear the in-depth story.
Yeah, we get nerdy, man.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
No, I love it, man. Cool. I love it.
Well, I appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll see you again sometime.
Hey, Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Man, brother.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.